Welcome to Survival Strategies for Anyone Who Loves a Gambling Addict. Together, we'll learn to build a bubble around ourselves where peace, joy, serenity, and financial security can exist, regardless of what our gamblers choose to do and the chaos they create. This podcast is intended for mature audiences and includes topics and language that may not be suitable for young children. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome. I'm Jody, and I am here with Jody Bechtold. Jody, we could be discussing many things today. We could be discussing your book, which is the manual for how therapists should view gambling treatment. You are the CEO and founder of the Better Institute, which is dedicated to treating the gambling addiction. You're a boots on the ground social worker in Pennsylvania, all kinds of awards. She's got lots of initials after her name. But I am most excited to talk to you today about your role as president at the International Problem Gambling and Gaming Certification Organization.
That's a
Uh,
mouthful.
that is a mouthful. And I'll tell you, just trying to get to the website, I'm like, is it IGP? I don't know what it is. So this is such a priority to me. Over 35 years in support group meetings. And the number one consistent issue is finding the right therapist.
Yeah.
And the horror stories that I have heard, and I wish I could say, look, that was 30 years ago. I'm talking about 6 months ago. And
Yeah.
so I just really wanted to dive into this so that people understand the resource that's out there and why it's so important to seek it out. So, one of the first questions I wanted to ask you, and I know why I'm entangled in gambling recovery. What initially interested you in this world of gambling and addiction?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fun story for me. I went back to school at the age of 30 to get my social work degree, and I was working in the SUD space. That was really at the time of the initial opioid epidemic, and, loved it, loved working in addiction. I can say that I'm in recovery as an ACOA. And my father moved to Hawaii when I was pretty young, and I say that for a reason because, Hawaii is where you cannot gamble, okay? So, he was in recovery or he just stopped drinking, we'll just say that, and you could see kind of, the cigarette smoking, all of these things, and when I look back, I'm just so grateful that he lived in Hawaii so that he did not develop a gambling problem because I got into this space when Pennsylvania expanded, legalized gambling, and we started having casinos open up everywhere. So that was between the years of 2006, 2008, and I was like, "I'll go to a training. I'll learn a little bit. I'll ride this wave. It probably will be a short ride." And I went to the training, and I was like, "I really get this disorder." And as a clinician, we should not treat disorders that don't really speak to us. Like, we're not there to be all things to everyone. And addiction is really something that really speaks to me. Recovery speaks to me, and I really enjoy going to a problem gambling training. Had to drive across the state to do it, and then I learned about the certification, which at that point was a national certification. And I had to drive to Maryland for a training. I had to drive to Ohio for a training. Had to do a lot. I really, really had to hustle to get trainings and to work on a certification. Went to a couple conferences and even went to a national conference by myself. And my husband's like, "You're going to go to Milwaukee by yourself?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Strange, but interesting." And I came back and I was like, "These are my people."
Wow.
And I have just never looked back since. I'm just very passionate about helping people. I just truly believe this is a very treatable disorder. And one of the things that we do at the Better Institute is we make sure that we are saving one family at a time. So when someone comes to me with a problem with gambling, I'm immediately figuring out who is their partner, spouse, or loved one. How do we get them into therapy? And eventually, how do we get the family or the couple to get counseling together? And it's working. We have many, many success stories. It really is working. This is a very treatable disorder when you know what you're doing.
When did it occur to the therapeutic community that we needed to know what we were doing? Because it
Yeah.
wasn't always a thing.
Yeah. The roots and the history of the certification board goes back to 1984. And it was really a very small and mighty group that it had a fiscal sponsor. So it really kind of wasn't a nonprofit really running itself. It was just kind of getting along. And it was a big deal in problem gambling, but it was a small, closed, mighty group that talked about it. Um, didn't do a lot with marketing or, big website to-dos or anything like that. So that's probably why it stayed so small and quiet for so long. In I had been on the board for quite a while. And in 2020, we decided to stand up on our own and leave our fiscal sponsor. And that was a big move. We found out that we weren't registered as a 501(c)(3) like we thought we were supposed to be. And we didn't have any money in a bank account. So essentially, the certification board was kind of like a new company since 2020. In the process of getting registered as 501(c)(3), the IRS kept denying our application because of the word gambling. And they kept thinking like we were in a gambling operator in the industry. And our attorney said, change your name and then we'll file. And so it was a long haul because, of course, during the pandemic, IRS moved slow, everybody moved slow. But we, in at the end of 2024, were officially 501(c)(3, and then that's why we did a big name change starting January 1. So we went from the International Gambling Counselor Certification Board, IGCCB, to International Problem Gambling and Gaming Certification Organization because we do a lot with internet and video gaming as well. And we had to put the word problem in there. It's just a weird story, right? But in doing that with the name change and things like that, I had been vice president for a while. And when they asked me to come back, I said, sure, but I need to be president. I have a history of running businesses, and I was going to also help run this organization as well. So we are, really gaining traction. A lot of it is dedicating time and resources to the website, really understanding the needs in all the different communities. Again, we're international, so we have people certified in Iceland and the Philippines and, Brazil and, like different places. What are the needs? But we do tend to be heavy US based because that's where we started. So it's a great board. It needs to grow. We're looking, to expand with an executive director and get some funding, all the fun things that a nonprofit needs to do. But the directory that we have on the website is probably the number one visited page of our website. And for anybody listening, it's a professional certification directory because we offer more than just clinical certifications now, and it is what the professional has said. I authorize you to put me on this public website. So we might have a lot more people certified. Not everybody wants to be on that public website, but it's a pretty big website directory given kind of what it looked like in 2020. So, long-winded way to answer your question. I think the other thing that we noticed is that as every state started to expand legalized gambling, they had in their legislation something about expanding workforce. And so many states have been very focused on how to expand the workforce that is trained in problem gambling and the treatment of gambling disorders. But at the same time, we actually had a lot of people retire during the pandemic. So some states, it might be a net gain of 0 when you think about who retired and who's getting certified now. But I do see, because I certify people in 5 states, I do a lot of supervision in 5 different states, the numbers are growing more than we've ever seen before, so it's very encouraging.
Oh, that is good to hear because it is only those therapists with that certification that I will recommend anyone in in the sphere of a gambler reach out to.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to be certified? What's the process?
Yeah, that's a great question because some people get it mixed up with, like, state licensure. Um, when you have a license, just like a driver's license, you can drive any car, but you need like a CDL or a motorcycle license. It has to be real specific. So certifications are things, content areas where people go very deep and they become experts. Where licensure means you're very broad. Okay, so you don't just take a training and say you're certified. And I think that's probably the number one myth that people might think.
Mhm.
We require for our clinical certification track, at a minimum, there's a 30-hour training. And this 30-hour training, which is a lot, 30 hours is a lot, is 100% focused on gambling disorders for individuals and affected others. From the 30 hours, you then have to pass an exam and you have to accrue 100 hours of direct practice. And so what that means is you have to then start to work with individuals with gambling disorders, at risk, problematic, loved ones, affected others, doing outreach, doing advocacy, you name it, lots of different activities to equal 100 hours. Now, when I did this, I had a caseload of one, and then I had a caseload of one, and then I had a caseload of one, right? It took a while to get 100 hours. Today, in many states, that a lot of the states that have sports betting as well as maybe even iGaming, they can get 100 hours, maybe even in 3 months. And then the final piece is you have to have a minimum of 4 hours of supervision with an approved, board approved clinical consultant, a BACC. That is the highest level certification under our organization. And they oversee what that individual is doing. And then when they sign off, then that person can become certified. So there's several steps. If somebody were to do this in the United States by themselves, they'd have to find the 30-hour training. They'd have to pay for the exam. They'd have to pay for supervision. They have to pay for the application, and that could be about $1,000. So it's not small, but in our profession, we're always doing things to do professional development. So it's a very common pathway for many people. So it's a process. We always let people who are in process of getting certified work with individuals and affected others um, under the supervision of a BACC. So for some, it can take as little as maybe 4 to 6 months. Other people, it might take them up to 2 years before they're fully certified. But it's amazing and a huge accomplishment to get those letters after your name. Yeah.
Because there are lots of certifications out there where all you have to do is just, sit behind your computer, watch some videos, take your test, and the certificate is in your inbox. And
Yeah. There are so many people that are very, skilled clinicians that then get, the training in problem gambling, and they say, I didn't know all of this. I had no idea." And I'm like, "Yeah, we can say that across all addictions, there's about 60%, I'm just using numbers for conversation, about 60%, is the same. But the 40% that is different is very different, which is why you need training and supervision." Yeah.
well, and it's good to hear that clinicians are getting to the end of that certification and feeling like it's valuable. This is stuff I didn't know and would not have been qualified to address.
Yeah.
And I hope they're telling their friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really hope they're telling their friends. And so, does the certification? You alluded to this. Does the certification deal with just treating the gambler, or does it deal with treating the family as well?
Yeah, the family as well. There's a component of the training that focuses heavily on family. There's a component that focuses heavily on adolescence, because those are, differences. How do you help the family? How do you work with a family member and maybe never see the gambler? I've had numerous situations like that. We often say, if the addict isn't ready, help the family. So, yeah, the training will cover all of that.
I love that. If the addict isn't ready, help the family. They often don't realize that they have jumped onto that merry-go-round and they're as much a part of that addiction cycle as the
Yeah.
addict themselves.
Yeah.
And they don't realize they have the power to get off of it.
Mhm.
And I was so glad to hear that it really started flowing after 2020 because when you said it was there at 1984, I'm go now wait a minute, I didn't hear about this. Because it really has been in the last 5 years a thing. Uh,
It
and
does. Yeah.
and I grab onto that. I make it very specific to anyone in the room that I facilitate. Hey, you're better off seeing no one than to see someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. Uh, and so what can you tell me are some of the biggest challenges that are faced and maybe the red flags that you see when people who aren't certified, aren't educated in this try to treat this addiction?
Yeah. Well, it's the 40% that is so different. And, it's no different than if we were talking about sex addiction. The 40% about what you do is sex addiction, right? You need that training and certification to understand. And so that's why I don't like it when we lump all addictions together. And I've told people, if someone says, I know one addiction, I know them all, run the other way, right? Um, can't underscore finances, there isn't any other disorder that we are clinically trained in to get this much into somebody's business about their money, their finances, and learn to use the finances and the whole financial picture therapeutically, right? And so just, a quick example, I could have a client tell me how they took $2,000 and, spent it sports betting in an hour, and they did it by some of it was crypto, and they paid this crazy fee to convert real money into crypto. And then at the end of the session, I remind them they have a $20 copay, and they say, "Are you kidding me?" Right? And so that's that gambling money, real money, cognitive distortion that you would not know unless you took the training and you were under supervision. So the money is probably a really big one. The second one, which I know is hard for some people to understand, is that some individuals will do just fine from a harm reduction perspective. And that is just you just don't teach people, typically to, when they make it to treatment, learn to drink responsibly. They're just too far on the continuum. But there are many people that come to therapy with a gambling problem, later age onset, hasn't been chronic for years and years and years. And you really see that the gambling was just the thing to help them avoid whatever else they felt was unsolvable in their life. And through therapy, you're helping them address what's unsolvable and make it solvable. And then gambling really doesn't take that much of their life anymore, and they can take it or leave it, or they can follow a harm reduction plan and be very responsible. And that really, a lot of people go, "Really?" And I go, "Yeah, it actually works with quite a lot of people, when they're not too far on the continuum of, in progression." So that's another one I think that is misunderstood. Family is a big one. Most other disorders, you have the identified patient, the identified client, and then you meet the family. Nope. With this disorder, since a long, long time ago, family members were able to get treatment for themselves without the gambler present. And states even pay for family members to get treatment and care without the gambler present. You don't see that in any other disorder. You don't see that in any other payer system. And being able to understand the severity and why we need to help family members, the finances, the taxes, housing, anything like that. How do you help give them a full protection plan, financial, legal, everything? Don't see that the same in other disorders. So those are probably the 3 that really stand out to me. I mean, if I thought a little bit more about it, I could think of some more. But those are the ones you would definitely, um, with every client, make sure that you have addressed all of those issues as part of, good clinical care.
I'm making notes, Jody. I'm making
Right?
notes. And I wanna go back, I'm gonna circle back to the money.
Yeah,
That is it is so important in this addiction, and my husband and I have been the facilitators of the pressure relief meeting
yeah,
in our, support organization for about 20 years.
yeah,
And the money piece of it, I tell the people in my room, look, you can't even begin to address the emotional damage when you think you're not going to have a roof over your head tomorrow, when you don't know how you're going to feed your children
yeah,
next week. You have no idea what your spouse makes as an income because they are keeping everything from you. It is a it is a means of being held hostage,
yeah.
and there is such shame around it. Uh, I reflect and go, "Oh my god, I was so stupid." No, I didn't know.
That's right.
I just didn't know. What we like to say is a gambler is stunted developmentally at the age of 12. And when you think about how a 12-year-old manages their money, it's about the same.
Yeah,
And and being able to make that connection again. Too many people think it's about the balance in your checkbook.
mhm.
It's a money issue or it's a budget issue. You just need a better budget. You need better investments. And then we'll solve this problem.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so much about gambling, disorder gambling is about cognitive distortions. And so in therapy, we're always trying to restructure those thoughts. All right. So the common one is you have money, you don't have real money and gambling money. The second one is that you do pay all your bills every month. I have a bunch of sayings with my clients. One is, look, it's a universal principle. We can all spend more than we make. All of us have to learn to manage and self regulate for the rest of our lives. So I tell people that. Another one I say is money is supposed to hurt when you spend it. It's supposed to give you pause and make you think. And in our cashless world, we're really far from that. And then my last one I love to say, and I got it from Ambus when he was speaking, every dollar needs a job,
Mhm.
right? And then you don't have this, I have disposable free income. Like, nope, every dollar has a job. What's its job? And doing that with clients, because they have compartmentalized the gambling debt from, any other debt. When they come into therapy, we make them look at that full picture, just like you're talking about in pressure relief. And for many, they have no clue. They are, could be upwards of $20,000 off on the number. And that is at that point where they are at the greatest risk for considering suicide because they feel like, "I can't solve this overnight. There's no way I can gamble or bet and get this kind of money. My family would be better off without me." And it's our job to give them a plan and give them hope. What we've seen, is pressure relief has been really effective for decades. And we're finding that in the 7 states that have sports betting and iGaming, which means you can do every form of gambling in person and online, that, pressure relief, they're getting inundated with requests, and some things are becoming so complex that they need even, more professionals,
Yes.
involved, right? So, I always like, for listeners to put in context the United States right now. In 2018, we had 2 states that could sports bet. In 2026, at the time of this recording, we have 40 states that can sports bet. And after 2018, 7 states have legalized iGaming, which is all online casino, slots, table games, um, just social games where real money goes in, never to get real money out. Most of the lotteries then went online, so you can sit on your couch and buy a Powerball ticket. Like, just think about how disastrous
Mhm.
that is. And so I'm in a state that was one of the first 4. So I've been dealing with the iGaming and online sports betting since 2019. I have never seen such complex financial situations until the iGaming, right? I mean, I'm immune to some numbers right now when people tell me $200,000
Mhm.
in a short amount of time. $500,000. Like, "How did you get all of this?" Well, all those credit cards, all those, online loan companies, I mean, they kept pace in the online world to allow people to have access to money when they should have never qualified for it.
It's a predatory environment, and they are looking for
Yeah,
someone who is an addict. Quite frankly, that's
yeah,
their target market. Because anyone who's not an addict wouldn't do it. The unknowns from a spouse, from a family member, they can't conceive of what those numbers look like, and their panic when they find out, their responses when they find out, it can exacerbate that shame and those thoughts that say, "Hey, I'm never going to get out of this."
yeah,
You know, there are people who have gotten into that much trouble who aren't gambling addicts. You will get out of it. And it's part of the GA program. It's on page 17 as one of the main things that you have to do, but it is one of the things most people will avoid. They'll call it oh, I've got a budget. We've got a budget. My wife has it all under control. And what we run into is if you don't do it the right way, what happens is the spouse takes on all of this responsibility for the finances. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're calling the creditors. They're trying to manage all of this financial stress. And the gambler is out there free as bird,
yeah,
not having to worry about anything because I've turned everything over to my spouse. And we find that, okay, well, whereas that person might be better qualified right now to handle those finances, they're now resentful all the time, and now you're creating some other real emotional hardships in your relationship that are going to be very difficult to recover from. And
yeah.
so we try to get in as quickly as we can. I was never so happy to hear about the introduction of a company as I was GamFin, because there are companies out there that specialize in this and are an extended resource, and it is not the world it was 10 years ago. Uh,
Yeah, I learned of GAMFin ironically during the pandemic. The founder, Alex DeMarco, and I were both on a webinar, panel together. I really like what GAMFin is doing. I myself, because 'cause I've been doing this so long, was like, I'm a businesswoman also, I can help people with their finances, but the complexities
yes.
are
Yeah.
some people could not even imagine them. And
Mhm.
then, in this iGaming world that I'm talking about, um, people would, use PayPal or Venmo or what have you kind of as that third party payer. They didn't know, some of the reporting requirements, and they would get, a notice from the IRS 2 years later saying, "You have $56,000 of unreported income on your whatever year taxes." And they didn't know that because they were using PayPal or Venmo, as a pass through, they had checked the at that point 20,200 transactions that forced PayPal and Venmo to report to the IRS, and they didn't know that, right? So that's a level of complexity that I had never dealt with pre-iGaming, and that was a big one. We started seeing a lot of IRS notices.
And thinking about, okay, maybe I'm 2 years into my recovery and I feel like I've gotten things under control, and then you just have the rug pulled out from
Yep,
underneath
you
you.
do.
And as a spouse, you might go, "Oh my gosh, you're lying to me again."
Yep,
And we say a lot, "Look, this is someone who has lied for a living. They don't even know what they've done."
that's right.
So if you're gonna sit down with them and say, "Tell me everything. Today you get to tell me everything and I'll forgive you." You will not hear everything because there's no way they can actually grasp what
Yep.
everything is. It it doesn't work.
Yeah, and that goes back to those cognitive distortions and
Mhm.
things like that,
Yes. Yes.
compartmentalizing for safe to keep the brain and the body safe, right?
So I want to say the term harm reduction sends a lot of family members
Yeah,
immediately into PTSD.
yeah,
Uh, it rings of harm reduction. You don't think we've tried that before? You
yeah.
don't think we've spent the last 10 years going, okay, m- maybe you can gamble with this as a budget. Maybe we can gamble with these, barriers in place. And so to hear you say, look, some people qualify for that, some people don't. Typically, if you're someone who has been trying to stop gambling for 10 years and you've crossed every barrier, you've broken through every budget amount you've been given, harm reduction is probably not on the plate for you.
Yeah, and therapists are trained to do a full, harm reduction assessment to really determine if that is, a viable path. Um, I will tell you that when most therapists say harm reduction doesn't work, I will say, "You're not doing it correctly."
Or you don't have the right person you're trying to do it with. That
Well, but that's my thing. If you're doing it
Mhm.
correctly, you have already done a thorough assessment to
Yes.
even know if you should be
Yeah.
doing harm reduction and having that conversation. One of the basic requirements for harm reduction is that you have to have money left over as a form of entertainment. Okay. So that's where the budget and spending plan comes in. You have to do that first before you can determine if you can even do harm reduction. And my quote is, every choice must reduce harm, not increase harm. So if you say you want to gamble 500 a month and that means you don't have money to pay your credit card bill, well, you just increased harm, not reduced harm.
Mhm.
So then you can't do that, right? So there's a lot that goes into an effective harm reduction plan. The
Okay.
ultimate goal of harm reduction is abstinence, just not right away. And doing harm reduction for some individuals keeps them in therapy long enough to be able to get enough information and education and psychoeducation to them so that they start making better decisions. This is a very high dropout
Mhm.
disorder. And how do you keep people engaged and coming back? Sometimes harm reduction is a way of doing that, but it has to have buy in from the family. Right? I will say to people, if your partner or spouse does not want harm reduction and they're saying you gamble one more time, we're done, right? You can't say, my therapist says we're doing harm reduction. Can't do that because you're gambling with your marriage and that increases harm. So, I love to talk about harm reduction, Jody, as you can tell, because so many people don't do it correctly. It's a rookie move when they do it. And there's so many myths out there that you have to learn to be very skilled at doing harm reduction. And when it works, it really does work. And I will say, with the new generation of very young sports bettors, sometimes harm reduction is the way you keep them engaged and you are able to then teach them how to have other things going on in their lives. You're kind of helping them grow up and launch into adulthood successfully. The parents will be a part of the harm reduction plan, and it's really complicated for a reason. So here's an example for listeners. If I have a 23, 24-year-old already out of college that's a pharmacist, a lawyer, these are not low-paying jobs. They don't have a lot of financial obligations yet. Harm reduction for sports betting would include what is your budget for betting each week. Now set a limit using the limit setting in the app so you can't go over because the app won't let you. You only use 1 app, nobody needs 3. What else are you doing with your leisure time? What money are you putting away for your retirement if you have additional, 'cause the research is very strong, 26-year-olds, well-educated, with a lot of disposable income in a state with sports betting. Okay, well, that's 40 states now. Then what's accountability do you have? Who also has access to your bank account? And show me your win-loss or your betting behavior every time we meet in therapy. Like, that's a lot of accountability for a 23 to 26-year-old who probably can't conceptualize never gambling again.
And I can't stress enough that a parent can't be that person.
Right.
And quite frankly, neither is a spouse.
Yep.
You will wind up with nothing but arguments if you try to do it as a spouse.
Yeah.
As a parent, they are the ones that I think carry the heaviest burden of guilt and shame. They want to take all the accountability. It's hard to get them to let
Mhm.
go of that.
Absolutely.
And for that reason, they can't be that person who's sitting there and asking them those accountability questions.
Yeah.
It just won't work.
Yeah. Yeah, parents of this younger generation, they just wanna fix it and put it behind them, and they just keep fixing the next thing in hopes they can put it behind them until they can't fix it anymore, and then they really have to do their own recovery work to set the limits, let their adult child, in many cases, experience the natural consequences, right? And then be there to support them, not enable them.
A gentleman that came into our room, and every week he would say, money is no object for me. I just can't let my son go homeless. I can't. I'm not going to do it. It's not going to happen. Okay, so what's the other option? He's going to buy the kid an apartment. At least that way he knows the kid has somewhere to live, and he liked to stop at his son's, have dinner, and then come over to the meeting. And he stopped one night, knocked on the door, and some stranger answered the door. And he goes, "Who are you?" And they said, "Well, who are you?" He said, "My son lives here." And they said, "Oh, we're the Airbnb tenants." And his son had put the apartment on Airbnb and was living on the street. You can't you
Yeah,
can't fix it. And trying to tell people who say money is no object, I can pay whatever I need to pay. Look, you can't buy your way out of this. And where you think money might be not be an object, it will
yeah,
be at some point. They'll get to the
yeah,
bottom of that barrel of money at some point if you let them. So
yeah,
it's parents. It's a unique group of people that I feel such compassion for. We can You can walk away from your spouse. You can start over with someone else. You're going to struggle to walk away from a child, and
yeah,
that is so hard. I don't see how anyone can do it without some real help,
yeah.
some
They
real help.
definitely need the support, and then, as a therapist, you have to understand that it's gonna take time. You can't just say, "Stop giving them money right now." You gotta, be there to support them as they're getting more and more, comfortable with setting limits and sticking to them.
Well, and nobody comes in ready to just say, "Okay, that's it, that's it."
Yeah,
In 35 years, I have only seen one person who walked in and said, "Oh, that's it." I mean, she was out of there, and it was her husband. She was out of there. Everyone else comes in and they have their experiments they want to do, and they are encouraged to come back to the room, tell us about it, and okay, it didn't work. So now what? Now what's the next step? I had a dad who was an attorney, and he thought the solution was a well-worded contract. And he did that twice. Twice it failed. That's his walking through the experience and trying to decide what works, what doesn't, but also what you can live with and what you can't.
That's right.
Looking yourself in the mirror every day. Am I going to be okay with that? And if you're not, cool, you're not. Then
Right.
let's talk about what you would be comfortable with. And
Right.
for everyone, it is different. It's a really individual specific journey for each person, and it makes it complicated,
Yeah.
very complicated. How can someone connect with you for more help?
Right. So I'm in Pennsylvania and I have a team of 8 of us. Of the 8, majority of us are already certified. A couple are working towards our certification, like I explained. Um, many of us are licensed in multiple states, but if we're in a state that we can't treat someone, usually we point back to the IPGGC certification directory to see who's listed on that directory to help someone. Right. So it's easy to get a hold of me at betterinstitute.com and see all the stuff we have on our website. We have a lot of problem gambling resources for individuals, lots of uh, the different podcasts to promote and things like that. We know a lot of people will visit those long before they'll reach out and actually send us an email or send us a phone call or something like that. But love to hear from anyone because help is there. Um, and this is very treatable. It really is. We can save lives.
And that's the note we're going to end on, that it's treatable and we can save lives.
Mm,
I can't tell you how important this conversation has been to me. And I can't thank you enough for your time and your expertise. And most of all, your dedication to this group
thank
of
you.
people. Thanks to my listeners. And I hope you'll join me for our next episode.
Thanks, Jody.
You have been listening to Survival Strategies for Anyone Who Loves a Gambling Addict, a production of Boundarywise Consulting. Receive an alert when our next episode airs by following or subscribing on your podcast platform. The thoughts, opinions, and observations of the host are drawn from over 35 years of lived experience, involvement in state and local organizations, and industry awareness, as well as meaningful connections with thousands of spouses, parents, children, siblings, and friends whose lives were impacted by someone else's gambling. You can schedule an appointment with Jody or learn more about our workshops and other services by emailing Jody, Jodi, at boundarywiseconsulting.com. Thanks for listening.